Imagine waking up one morning and not knowing who you are anymore. Not because of illness, not because something happened to your memory, but because the person around whom you organized your entire life for 20, 25, 30 years is no longer there. And the version of yourself that existed inside that life no longer fits the one standing in front of the mirror. This is the experience that rarely surfaces in public conversations about divorce after 50. The paperwork gets discussed, the house, the finances. What tends to go unexamined is something more fundamental, the grief of losing not just a partner, but an entire constructed identity. While overall divorce rates have declined since the 1990s, divorces among adults over 50 have been rising steadily, now accounting for 36% of all divorces in the United States. The fastest growing group is not people in their 30s or 40s. It is people 65 and older. Researchers have named this pattern gray divorce, and the data behind it represents millions of people exiting marriages that lasted decades, entering a form of grief that most were not equipped to anticipate. Because grief is exactly what it is. We tend to associate grief with death. There are rituals for it, social frameworks, language that everyone understands. Divorce grief, particularly after a long marriage, operates without most of those structures. The other person is alive. Daily life continues. The world around you does not pause. And yet something has ended that was genuinely significant. The shared routines, the familiar home, the social world built together, the future that was assumed rather than planned. Researchers who study this process describe divorce grief as one of the most complex and under-acknowledged forms of loss a person can experience. It produces the same emotional responses documented in bereavement: sadness, anger, confusion, and, in some cases, relief. Relief does not cancel grief. Many people who feel relieved by the end of a difficult marriage still mourn what the marriage was, what they invested in it, and what it once represented. What distinguishes late-life divorce grief from earlier separations is not simply the length of the marriage. It is the depth of identity that formed within it. When a person spends decades as someone's partner, as a husband, a wife, a parent within a particular family structure, those roles do not merely describe behavior. They organize how a person understands themselves. The calendar, the friendships, the social rituals, the daily routines, all of it was structured around the marriage. When the marriage ends, that structure dissolves at once. Researchers describe this as identity disruption, a breakdown in how a person situates themselves in the world. A study following divorced individuals with a mean age of 55.6 years and an average marriage duration of nearly 24 years tracked psychological adaptation over 2 years. It measured depressive symptoms, life satisfaction, hopelessness, and mourning. What it found was that recovery was shaped by personality, resilience, and access to social support, not by the passage of time alone. Time, the research indicates, does not automatically resolve this kind of loss. If this kind of content is relevant to what you're going through, subscribing to this channel means you won't miss what comes next. One of the most significant consequences of gray divorce is the social reorganization it forces. When a marriage ends, it rarely ends in isolation. It takes with it mutual friendships, extended family relationships, and the social rituals that provide its structure. Shared social circles often fracture. Friends withdraw, sometimes from both parties simultaneously. Longitudinal research found that 50% of men and women lost friendships following a divorce, and that 12 years later, those friendships had not been replaced. That is not a temporary disruption. It is a permanent reshaping of a person's social environment, occurring at the precise stage of life when forming new relationships becomes more difficult. Social isolation affects men and women differently in the context of gray divorce, but research documents a particular pattern for men. Professor Jocelyn Crowley of Rutgers University, who interviewed 80 people who had divorced after 50, observed what she described as a social gray divorce penalty disproportionately affecting men. Men were more frequently alienated from their adult children following the separation, often because they had been less involved in the day-to-day work of parenting. Many had also relied on their wives, without fully recognizing it, to maintain the couple's social life, organizing gatherings, sustaining friendships, structuring holidays. When the marriage ended, the social architecture it had supported collapsed. Research consistently links this kind of isolation to increased risk for mental health decline, chronic disease, and shortened lifespans. In later life, social isolation is not only a psychological condition, it functions as a measurable health risk. For women, the grief takes a different form, but it is no less disorienting. Post-divorce identity reconstruction for women who have spent decades organizing their lives around the roles of wife and mother involves rebuilding a sense of self from a point of significant disruption. Studies on divorced older women document patterns of economic vulnerability, emotional strain, health complications, and social stigma, arriving simultaneously, requiring a person to grieve and restructure at the same time. The research also documents something less expected. Many women, through the process of reconstructing their identities, arrive at a clearer sense of self-worth than they had before. The process is neither fast nor painless, but it is documented. There is a dimension of gray divorce that receives less attention: its effect on adult children. The common assumption is that because children are grown, the impact is reduced. Research does not support that assumption. When parents divorce later in life, adult children are frequently drawn into the role of emotional mediator, listening to both parents, managing conflict, absorbing disclosures they were not asked to receive. Researchers describe this as parentification, a role reversal in which adult children function as emotional support systems for their parents. It is a taxing position that often leads to gradual distancing from both relationships. For a parent already managing the grief of a late-life separation, that secondary distancing compounds an already significant loss. Gray divorce also tends to occur alongside other major life transitions: children leaving home, retirement, declining health, the loss of parents. This convergence is not accidental. These transitions cluster in the same stage of life. Their combined weight is considerable. For people over 50, the prospect of aging without a partner carries concerns that differ substantially from those of younger divorcees. Most people over 55 are managing multiple chronic health conditions. The thought of navigating illness, physical decline, and aging without a partner is a specific kind of loss, not just of the relationship, but of the shared future that was assumed. Depression and anxiety following gray divorce are not exceptional outcomes. They are common ones. Research tracking mental health trajectories around late-life separation confirms that depressive symptoms increase immediately following marital dissolution. Recovery, where it occurs, is gradual and uneven. Anger frequently accompanies grief, not as a pathological response, but as a functional one. Emotional numbness is also common, a form of shutdown that helps a person maintain daily function in the short term, but over time impedes recovery. Some people experience relief alongside grief. Relief that a difficult marriage has ended, followed by guilt for feeling relieved, followed by mourning for the years spent in something that did not endure. These responses are not contradictory. They exist together in the same person across the same period of time. Recovery, when it occurs, does not typically arrive as a single turning point. Research on resilience following late-life separation identifies two consistent factors: internal resilience, the capacity to adapt and find meaning, and external social support. Not broad social contact, but specific, available, emotionally grounded connection. Studies also note that a meaningful portion of people who divorced after 50 reported greater life satisfaction in the long run than they had within the marriages that ended. That outcome, however, is neither automatic nor universal. It is contingent on the conditions of the recovery process itself. The grief that follows gray divorce is real, layered, and does not resolve on a predictable timeline. It encompasses the loss of a shared history, a structured identity, a social world, and a vision of the future. These are substantial losses, and they are documented as such in the research. If you are somewhere in the middle of this process, leave a comment describing where you are, not to explain yourself, just to mark it. This channel follows these conversations over time, and the next video examines what the rebuilding process actually involves based on what the research shows about people who have been through it. Subscribe if you want to follow that conversation. And if this video reflected something you recognize, a like helps the channel reach others who are looking for the same thing.